Now let's bring in the Rise News analyst, Dr. Sam Amadi. He's also the director at the Abuja School for Social and Political Thought. Thank you so much, Dr. Amadi, for being on the news tonight.
Thank you, this one.
It does look like wherever you go, there are tariffs, there are increases, and the bottom excuse they give or reason is operational costs.
Absolutely.
So why is this passed to the consumers and not the services taking responsibility? For instance, why are the banks not taking more responsibility? Why push this to the customers? What do you make of this new CBN
first,
policy?
It doesn't rain, it pours. Okay, so it keep coming. And again, these are the escalators in terms of cost of business. So the central bank, first, this is portion to central bank powers, portion to the CBN guideline on charges, and to no question whether they have competence to do this, they do. Now the second issue is how reasonable. Okay, the fact is, we've been complaining about maybe ATM operations for some time. Vending is difficult. Sometimes there are no cash and all that. And you can see that some banks they don't have enough of ATMs, around.
The spread isn't
there. The spread is
yes.
not that widespread. Again, the central bank policy has been to move to digitalize and cashless policy, which means people to their apps. Maybe it's incentive for using ATM, as the case might be, an incentive to probably use your app and transact by yourself, even though there's charges. But what's driving this is cost of doing business. That's user fee for almost everything now. So if you look at all the charges that the banks take from customers for various transactions, if you do due diligence, perhaps someone can say that it's now becoming, maybe at some point, constituting significant harm or significant impact on low creditworthy customers, low customers who have maybe dealing with 100,000, dealing with 50,000, 20,000, 10,000, the case might be.
Yeah.
And so, whereas the percentage is almost negligible, I mean, maybe less than 1% in many cases. But I think what the surcharge itself is somehow 500 naira is a lot, for those who use
offsite,
ATMs.
Yes.
Again, maybe comparative to POS, so there will be some relativity here now. Is it better off using POS? Many Nigerians have migrated to POS because they seem to be more available compared to, the ATMs. Now also the banks themselves. So this is supposed to be an incentive for banks to spread their ATM because they will also talk about every of these services have a cost component. So the question is, how do you use users' fee to incentivize more efficiency? They build more, they construct more ATMs, they put out more ATMs.
That's the real question.
So with this, it's a device so that you pay more, perhaps you don't have to drive far to see an ATM. Those who live in semi-urban areas. So that's really the question. But ultimately, from all sides, people are paying more, whether it's electricity, whether it's financial transactions. So all sectors now are charging more, partly to reflect the increase in cost of doing business, and also partly to more profitability. And then within that, a regulatory pass can give pass for people to gauge, more extortionary or profit. So it's just about, is there a balance between cost and revenue coming from these charges that's coming?
Another thing I would like us to weigh is the pros and cons of this. I mean, beyond convenience, to say that this will allow for more ATMs across the country. So beyond convenience, what are the likely downsides to this? Are we going to see more people shift to mobile banking like you raised earlier? So we de-incentivize, physical cash carrying and all of that, and online transfers. But there are also issues with that.
Yeah, but again, don't forget that people also use this ATM to do online transfers. The issues there also, the systems need to be made to be smarter, much more reliable, so that apps work. Instances where customers complain about apps not working. Again, yes, we have a large phone user base is large, so you would assume that many people have access to phone, but oftentimes they do not probably have the data to run it. Which
is about to become more expensive and it's been debated.
Exactly. So basically, that's again, even some people like us, because of risk with apps on your phone for maybe travelers in terms of kidnapping, some people disable, apps because you would, once you have the apps, then probably you could be subject to extortion by criminals or other people. So I think there's going to be, the incentive works and incentive kicks in. So we're going to see more people maybe use their apps if they do the cost-benefit analysis. The problem with costs charges that often they're invisible. And they do not, the rationality that people respond to costs is sometimes, is pure rationality theory. In the real sense, bounded rationality, people might just go ahead with what they're doing because it's habit. Again, the central bank circular talks about changing habits. So would this be enough to internalize the cost in a way that people begin to use more digital and then the cashless policy gets a boost? Or will people struggle and then there's a welfare loss because they're spending more to do this transaction, but they are trapped in a particular mode of transaction because the social habit dies off. So I think this alone, without some public enlightenment, may not be able to create too much significant shift in terms of habits relating to financial transactions.
I know there are those who wonder, with all the profits that the banks declare yearly, you wonder why they're not able to bear the costs of their own operations to expand their businesses. But the question I want to ask you is, has the CBN put the cart before the horse when it comes to this policy? Because only recently we saw the regulator fine a couple of banks for failing to have cash in their ATMs, even during the Yuletide season. So if the banks are unable to fund the ATMs in the first instance, what's the guarantee that having them widespread across the country will enable funds to be in them?
Absolutely. The banks, the CBN can reply and say, look, the reason why the banks are not meeting those obligations because it's operational and therefore some element of cost. I mean, it may look like put the cash there, it's easy, but it has some cost. But look at it this way. Every regulator of financial services, utility services, financial services, depend on ideology. I think it looks like, people have said that before, even from the time of MFL, even before then, that because the guys who run the central bank are mostly from banking sector, unlike what you see maybe in the US, where the Fed are more of policy economists and policy guys. There's this identification with the bottom line of the financial institutions. So the central bank is more prone to always look at how these banks are struggling. Perhaps they don't have a forum to get back the feedback of, so it's like balancing. The customers are always at the losing end. So if you do a due diligence of these charges, discover that maybe the banks, because the profit they declare doesn't match the quality of service they provide. Let's not forget banking supporting real sector growth. But in terms of customer service, in terms of maybe they make sure the cash are available, they're not doing very well. And so the argument from a theory about regulation is that these guys are kind of embedded or some soft capture by the financial institutions because they come from the financial institutions, and so the concerns of the financial institutions are more legible to them than the concerns of customers. So I think we can fairly say there's no fair balance in regulatory approach between for a long time. The central bank has tilted more to responding to the cost logic of banks and less about the service logic of bank users. This
is meant to commence March 1st. That's just a couple of weeks away. Do you see any protest to this, any unintended consequences to this policy?
I think we don't have first is, would there be some kind of pushback, customers outrage? Don't forget that there was also a 5% once that the central bank came up because of their law, the new law, people fought against it. It looks like oftentimes the thing about policies like this, that the effect is imperceptible. So nobody sits back and calculate how much am I going to lose, a mode. So it's not very clear. People say, oh, they have increased this, but until people start getting those charges, they're not going to start feeling it. So for now, I think there will be not much disruption. People are going to the news will just disappear in the air because the heat has started, hitting home. Now this is where labor, if Nubife, for example, or even customer groups can now begin to articulate and begin to think around the impact in terms of welfare loss for customers, those who are low-income earners, and those who use their salaries to do transactions. What would be these further taxes up, utilities fees are up. So everything here adds back to the real disposable income and impacts on welfare of the people. So until those calculations begin to be made, and some group create that collective action effect, override it, let's come together and lead this. I think people will just wait until it hits someone. When it hits them, maybe then it now becomes tags to some other wave of protest, and then maybe it becomes part of a general commitment to fight back. For now, I don't predict too much social unrest.
We'll wait and see how it plays out. Dr. Sam Amadi, Rise News analyst and director at the Abuja School for Social and Political Thought. Thank you so much.